Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All in Crypto podcast. I am All in Crypto, and today we have a special guest coming on the show. We've got Yago, the chief cheerleader of Sovryn, here with us today to talk about Sovryn, the project, what they're trying to do, and some of the interesting things that are currently going on with the project at the moment. So welcome on board, Yago.
Thanks for having me. It's great to chat.
Yeah, it is a real pleasure. Sovryn's a project that I've been interested in a while, and I really couldn't wait to get you on to talk to us about the project and really share it with my audience. So where I like to start with all my guests is a little bit about yourself. Who are you, and a little bit of your backstory?
Sure. So I was born in South Africa. My family were sort of the perfect family to have to eventually get me into Bitcoin, because one side of my family had been in concentration camps in Germany, and the other side of the family, because they were German, were in concentration camps, had been in concentration camps in the UK, in South Africa. And so they had developed a certain skill set around survival. And one of the key lessons that I grew up on is that if you want to be able to ensure your freedom and your security, you need to first deal with securing the freedom and security of your finances. So, for example, my Polish family, the way they managed to survive the Holocaust was they were very lucky that just in time they managed to convert what money they had into gems and jewels, which they could hide on themselves, and they managed to smuggle themselves and pay for, living in a gutter under a farmhouse through that. And then sort of the generation after that joined the ANC, which was Nelson Mandela's anti-apartheid party. And the apartheid government declared that they were terrorists, and some of them had to flee South Africa, and so effectively became refugees. And so when I was a young boy, I first of all saw that, but then also was conscripted into the family's project to get money to them. And so I ended up having my mother buy gold Krugerrands, sew them into my clothes, and then send me on missions abroad to smuggle the gold overseas. So that is what I was doing between the ages of 9 and 11. And so that was the context in which I grew up. I then went on to study neuroscience. I started working on neural networks. This was sort of AI before AI. And because I was reading in network science, in 2011, I came across this paper, the Satoshi white paper, which had nothing to do with the kind of networks I was dealing with, but blew my mind. And I, immediately, like by the time I'd finished reading the paper, first of all, I'd spilt my coffee. Second, I'd emailed everyone I knew telling them this was going to be the biggest thing that we saw in our lives. Because what I saw there was not just digital gold, but also something I'd been thinking about for many years at that point, was that the internet was this weird thing. It was the most advanced technology, the most advanced sort of space that we could inhabit, but it had the political structure of a primitive, pharaoh society, right? You have these pharaohs who, instead of controlling the flow of the Nile, they control the servers and the flow of the data. And so we've got, Facebook and Amazon. And the reason that we have this really primitive, unequal internet from a political, economic standpoint was because we didn't have a fundamental thing which had allowed us to advance as civilization, which was property rights. And as I was reading this paper, I realized that not only was it describing digital gold, digital commodities, but also a way of creating digital property rights. And I thought that this was going to change not just the internet, but the world. And so within a few months, I had gone all Bitcoin, and I haven't looked back. It's completely changed the trajectory of my life.
Wow, that is nothing short of fascinating. What a backstory. I mean, and you're so right in what you're saying in regards to what Bitcoin's brought to the table, because it's kind of opened Pandora's box, you know, and your comments on history. If you look throughout history, one of the controlling mechanisms throughout history has always been money. And that definition, that new kind of world is up for grabs with Bitcoin. That's what Bitcoin's brought to the table more importantly than I think anything. You know, even the religious texts that you have, whether it be the Bible or the Quran, they all talk about money lenders and kind of manipulators in a negative light. And in today's society, something we're a big advocate of on the channel is people need to get financially savvy, because finance is really at the heart of everything. It directly impacts your life. And the people who control that finance, you know, have a great power over everything. And what Bitcoin's bringing to the table is freedom more so than anything. You know, I didn't really understand all that when I kind of first got into Bitcoin. I think it takes a while. And then you kind of go, actually, there's a lot more here than making a bit of money on a trade. There's the very fabric of the societies that we currently live in being challenged here with Bitcoin. And certainly at the moment, I mean, how relevant is that with everything going on with the banking? And there's never been more people awake today in regards to the current financial systems that we have, and actually looking back in history at how financial systems have always been used to manipulate people, as there is today. Absolutely fascinating. So would you say you're a Bitcoiner? Would you say you're specifically interested in Bitcoin, or does your scope kind of go more widely in regards to the crypto space?
I would say I don't care about Bitcoin at all, except in terms of what it brings to the world.
Yep.
And I think the things that it brings to the world, the revolution that it introduces, the advancement is phenomenal. We have always had to deal with human problems through the lens of sort of social sciences. You were talking about religion, or we've tried democracy, we've tried constitutions, we've tried all kinds of wordy ways to get people to collaborate. And there's another form of collaboration which doesn't require any of that. It's the free market. It's allowed people to collaborate and to grow productivity in ways which, charismatic leaders never have been able to. But beyond that, sort of taking that to the next level is Bitcoin. And one of the things that you were talking about is the corruption we see in finance and the concerns that people have around money. There's this saying, money is the root of all evil. And I think it's a very important but misguided saying. You know, if you want to be a rational person, one of the things you need to learn not to do is not to kill the messenger. When somebody is giving you even unhappy information, they're giving you a window into the truth. Now, money is that messenger. Money is the window into the truth. The reason people think and have thought throughout history that money is the root of all evil is because what money represents is a agreement, a trust, a bond of trust between all people in society, right? If I come to you and I give you a piece of paper or a digital signature or whatever, and you give me a sandwich or a car, you have to have a lot of trust in society that that is still going to be valuable to you, right? And so when the trust in society is corrupted, when there is corruption in society, the first place we feel it is in our pockets. Money becomes the messenger of corruption in society. And so people who don't understand this distinction, they have confused money for the corruption itself. But money is trust. The corruption is generated and signaled to us through the money. And so you see this in dramatic ways in places where there's inflation, or where there's capital controls, or where the government tries to stop people from getting bank accounts or seizes their bank accounts. But you see it in more subtle ways, which we are all feeling when we see the massive divergence between the wealthy and the poor, when we see asset price inflation beyond wage inflation, when we see that a large number of people are being sort of trapped or locked out of the economy. In all of these ways, we are getting a signal which is telling us something has corrupted the trust in our society. And Bitcoin is not only a solution to this, but it is also the most powerful messenger because it is, as a messenger, impossible to corrupt itself.
Absolutely fascinating. I love what you said about free markets. You know, I'm a big believer in free markets. I'm a big fan of people like Milton Friedman, of course, Friedrich von Hayek, even going further back with people like Ludwig von Mises. You know, I do believe, and perhaps maybe you're a believer, that an overreaching government, if we look at what's happening today, is actually at the root of many of our problems. And what you're saying about Bitcoin money being that vessel, the messenger for the underlying intent of what's perhaps behind it, is an extremely powerful one. And Bitcoin eliminates a lot of that. I would love to move on to how you came to be interested in Sovryn and really started to cheerlead it. You know, what was that kind of path from being interested in Bitcoin to finding yourself now being somebody who's sort of championing Sovryn?
Well, throughout my interest in Bitcoin, I believe that Bitcoin as this thing that you hodl was only the beginning, right? If we want to see Bitcoin become valuable, and also if we want to protect Bitcoin by adding layers and layers of decentralization around Bitcoin, by decentralizing the economy around Bitcoin, we would need to add significant tooling around Bitcoin. Right, we would need decentralized exchange and trading. We would need decentralized lending. We would need decentralized stablecoins because most people can't stomach the volatility of Bitcoin. We would want ways to create communities with a set of rules that are just as programmatic and transparent and fair as Bitcoin's. In other words, Bitcoin sort of was this specific example of how we could create rights and property rights in a digital realm using cryptography instead of using violence, as you know, governments have always had to do. And I was excited to expand on what we could do with that invention, both in terms of Bitcoin and then also just thinking, how can we rewrite our society to create a global society for a digital age, which gives permissionless equal access to everyone, and effectively ties all people into a global market where they can all collaborate. During the early days of the pandemic, I was involved with a bunch of other people that I knew from the Bitcoin space in creating this sort of network of getting masks to people and especially hospitals who needed them. And because we're building out this decentralized network, we wanted to fundraise for it, and we were doing that with NFTs, and we were looking to bring those NFTs to Bitcoin because we were raising Bitcoin. And so from that, a few developers, we were part of a group which was called the Distributed Collective. A bunch of developers from the Distributed Collective realized that what they were building had bigger implications. And they started working on a decentralized exchange for Bitcoin. And some months later, they showed it to me. And I was, for me, like the penny dropped. Like, this is what I'd been looking for. And I joined that group, which created a DAO. And that DAO eventually in early 2021 launched Sovryn, which today is the biggest, fastest growing community and platform for decentralized finance and more generally decentralized governance systems on Bitcoin.
Yeah, that perfectly brings me on to asking you if you could maybe expand on Sovryn. So sort of give us an overview of what Sovryn is and a little bit about how it works.
Sure. So Sovryn is first and foremost an open source community. It's a group of people who are looking to make themselves more self-sovereign and to provide more tools of sovereignty to the world. The way we describe it is we're looking to build a world on Bitcoin, right? So as we discussed, Bitcoin has created a new way for us to create rights for people, property rights, and effectively any rights are property rights. And actually, maybe I'll take it just a very quick few seconds to discuss this, right? So what is a right? A right, what, we talk about rights a lot, but we don't talk about what they are. Rights are the ability to decide how something can be used, and also the ability to exclude other people from using them. So if you have right to your speech, you can say whatever you want, free speech, right? And you can also have the right to not allow other people to force you to say certain things. If you have the right to your body, right? You have the right for no one to violate your body, and you also have the right to do what you want with your body. So basically, all rights are property rights, and you can actually think of them as access controls, right? Basically, rights are access controls to your house, your car, your family, your money, whatever. Bitcoin is a system, a decentralized system for access controls, right? Which doesn't need an administrator. In other words, it gives everyone the ability to be the administrator themselves for whatever they have the right to. So Bitcoin is a decentralized rights engine. And we've never had something like that before. We've never had rights which are globally acceptable because Bitcoin is globally available. We've never had rights that are globally equal and transparent. In other words, everyone gets access to the same system of rights. And we've never had rights which are guarded by the individual and cryptography rather than by an administrator of power and with a monopoly on violence. This is an entirely new way of thinking about how we can structure our lives. And the people who are engaged in Sovryn are trying to build a world where more and more people have access to this system, have these types of access rights, and think, how can we build a world which, as a result, is less violent, is more free, has more openness, is more global, and allows for global trade. In other words, how do we build a world on Bitcoin? Not just the technology and the money, but also the philosophy. And so what Sovryn has looked to do as a community is go through 3 phases. The first phase was building out the core set of tools that would allow us to build a robust economy on Bitcoin, to build a user base, to build a capital base, and to attract the first community. And so we call this the DeFi for Bitcoin phase. And that has been the phase that Sovryn has been in for the last 2 years. And to a great extent, we've accomplished that phase and are now moving into phase 2. So I'll talk about how we've accomplished that phase in a moment. But before I do, let me map out phase 2 and phase 3.
Perfect.
Phase 2 is going to be and is about building and extending the capabilities of Bitcoin beyond money and finance into allowing us to have communications for free speech, DAOs for governance and creation of institutions for this new kind of world, and also being able to manage things like real world property rights. In other words, building out a platform which provides Bitcoin with all of the power, generalizing this access, this ability to control access rights in the same way that Ethereum or Solana or Polygon do, but secured by Bitcoin. And the reason it needs to be secured by Bitcoin is because Bitcoin is the only one of these systems that understands it's actually not a technology, right? This is not primarily a technological revolution. It's a socio-political revolution. It's a new way of us structuring our society. And for that, we need the underlying foundation, which is Bitcoin, right? Which is the core settlement layer. We need it to be unchanging, uncorruptible. We need it to be the same today as it will be tomorrow for our children and for our grandchildren. Because if we're building a society, it needs to have the ability to last. If we're building a house, right, which is going to last for 50 years, and we're creating that property, we're managing that property by a blockchain, we need the blockchain to be reliable for the next 50 years, right? And only Bitcoin really achieves that. And so phase two is expanding a platform. And what we currently believe that that's going to look like, and what we're currently working on, is building roll-ups to Bitcoin, right? So we can have infinite scale and bring any feature to Bitcoin. And then the third phase is going to be the most ambitious phase, and that is what we call the nation phase, the Bitcoin nation, right? Creating an actual nation, an actual society, an actual alternative to the nation state, which, instead of governing itself the way we govern ourselves now, with administrators, elites, and with institutions that we all can plainly see at this point are becoming more and more corrupted, less and less fit for purpose. Imagining what the new institutions based on this new technology could look like, and building them. So those are the three stages: DeFi to build the economy, platform and ZK rollups to expand what we can do with Bitcoin, and then building a nation, a world on Bitcoin. And where we are with the first stage is, I think we've managed to establish it. We feel now successful enough with it that we're moving on to stage two. And the reason is, Sovryn has now become by far the biggest DeFi platform for Bitcoin. It's in fact larger than all of the others put together. It's done well over $2 billion in trades, hundreds of millions in lending. It is extremely profitable for its stakeholders. So you can be a stakeholder in Sovryn, and instead of Sovryn printing new tokens like many other chains to try and reward stakers, it provides them directly with revenue. And these stakeholders are now earning between 25 and 30% APR. In other words, the protocol is self-sustaining, profitable. There's now, just in terms of the staking, well over 10,000, I believe it's now 15,000 stakers. We've had the system live and managing the governance of the protocol for now over 2 years, close to will be in 3 months will be 2.5 years. And so I think Sovryn, both as a protocol and as a community, has established itself as the leader in doing more with Bitcoin. And we're now in a really exciting time with BRC20s and ordinals and stacks and Sovryn and rollups for Bitcoin, and all of the things that are happening, Noster, that are happening in the Bitcoin space. We're seeing an explosion of innovation in the space, and so Sovryn is, as a community, continuing to push forward and look to lead in that space and build out the next step, the next evolution in what we can do with Bitcoin blockchain, with the Bitcoin blockchain, or with blockchains in general, because we can now take so many ideas that we've seen in other places, as well as new ideas, and build them on the most solid, most reliable foundation, and the most decentralized.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Just really, one thing I'd like to explore a bit more is, how does Sovryn actually facilitate DeFi on Bitcoin? What does that process look like? So we have Bitcoin, which, can we refer to Bitcoin as the layer one here? Is that how you refer to it?
Refer to it as the settlement layer, because I think that helps explain sort of what the difference between the different layers are, right? So if you think of Lightning as a transaction layer,
yep.
And what people sometimes call main chain or layer one is actually just a layer. It's the settlement layer, and it's also the consensus layer, right? It's the primary consensus layer. So what we are building on is a additional layer, right? We're building on a programmatic layer, or what you could call like an expressive or a financial layer. So it's basically an EVM, right? So like an Ethereum-like smart contract system built as a side chain to Bitcoin. This layer is called Rootstock, and Sovryn is built on Rootstock. And so when you want to use Rootstock, what you do is you move your Bitcoin, when you want to use Sovryn, you move your Bitcoin, you peg your Bitcoin into the Rootstock sidechain, And now you can trade with it. So we have AMMs, which allow trading. You can borrow and lend. You can transact with it much more cheaply. So Rootstock is quite unique. It's much cheaper than Ethereum, much cheaper than Arbitrum, for example. And so it provides a whole host of new capabilities, which Sovryn has used to develop a suite of DeFi and governance systems.
Yeah, and just going back to Rootstock, who's in charge of, because is it done via bridging? To put it in simple terms, you've got the Bitcoin network, you lock it up on that side, and then you mint, or not quite sure whether you'd use the term mint,
yes,
on the other side, and then you can take that into the kind of Sovryn world, and start to facilitate finance, having that one-to-one peg with Bitcoin taken care of via Rootstock.
That's right, yes. And so there's been a lot of work to make that as seamless as possible. So you can move very seamlessly within one Bitcoin block, using a relay called fast BTC. You can move in and out of Sovryn to other settlement layers. You can also transact over Lightning Network. And so one of the things that the community of developers around Sovryn have been doing is tying together all of these different layers and making them interoperable with each other.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I'm always, I think Bitcoin is, it's like building a house on sturdy grounds, really, building something on top of Bitcoin. So would you describe Sovryn as a layer 2?
Yeah, I think right now Sovryn is a suite of decentralized applications which are governed and tied together by what we call the Bitocracy, the sovereign governance system. The term layer, I think Rootstock can be thought of as the layer 2, but I think we tend to conflate or confuse, like, I don't think the things are so clear. So you've got applications and governance and the protocol level, and they are all related. So for example, Sovryn is working now on additional layers that we expect to introduce, right? Like rollups to Bitcoin. And as Sovryn introduces those, it will be true that Sovryn is also sort of like a new type of layer 2, as well as a set of applications. So I think, yeah, I think it's Sovryn is more than just a layer 2. Sorry about the rambling.
No.
There's some nuance there which is difficult to capture.
I think there's a lot of sort of terminology in the crypto space that is too broadly applied. Some things are a lot more specific, and I can see that with Sovryn. It is interesting because, like you say, you guys are really the largest kind of DeFi for Bitcoin. And of course, we've touched on why Bitcoin. Could we maybe sort of touch on some of the products that Sovryn is actually offering? So specific products. I know you guys have got a stablecoin. I think a lot of people out there don't even realize that you can have a Bitcoin zero fee. Zero interest stablecoin.
Well, all right. So I'll separate.
Maybe we can unpack that.
There's what's known as the sovereign dollar, and the sovereign dollar is a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin. And people used to say everyone should have 1 to 5% of their value in Bitcoin. And I think that was a great way to get people introduced to Bitcoin. Well, I would say everyone should have 1 to 5% of their dollar value, right? Like if you're holding dollars or pounds or stable coins, you should keep at least a portion of it in sovereign dollar. And the reason is that the sovereign dollar is the most decentralized stable coin with the most reliable backing. So it is collateralized only by Bitcoin, and it is massively over collateralized by Bitcoin. And that means that it maintains its peg by always being convertible to a dollar's worth of Bitcoin. But because it's backed by Bitcoin, you know that it can't collapse like Terra. You know that it can't be rugged like some of the other stable coins. And you know that it also can't be attacked in the way that Tether or USDC could be attacked by, overzealous regulators or losing banking partnerships or whatever. Like, we saw USDC crash to less than 80 cents on the dollar because they lost banking. Well, Bitcoin doesn't need that. And so as a result, the sovereign dollar doesn't need that either. And so if you're thinking, I want to have money, which isn't in a bank, which isn't under a mattress, which isn't, based on how much I trust the good people at Tether, right? If I want to make sure that there's some money that I have, which I'm always going to have access to, that no one can ever take away from me, right? That I'm always going to have access control over, then I think by far the best version of that is a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin, and that is the sovereign dollar. So that's one cool thing that has been built out by Sovryn. In addition, there are things like the Zero protocol, Sovryn Zero. So what Zero does is allows you to take your Bitcoin and borrow stablecoins, to borrow dollars effectively, at 0% interest into perpetuity. And the way it does this is you're actually not borrowing from anyone, but rather the protocol will issue dollars to you on the basis of the Bitcoin that you put into that protocol. And then your Bitcoin there is the security for the dollars that have been issued to you. So that Bitcoin will stay there unless the value of your sort of collateral drops so that you are redeemed against. And it will wait for you. And when you pay back your loan, you'll get Bitcoin. So, for example, there's a bunch of people who have bought houses this way. So there was a guy who 2 or 3 months ago, when Bitcoin was $16,000, he needed to buy a house. He didn't want to sell his house. I met him just recently. I was in Miami for the Bitcoin conference, and he kind of walked up to me in a bar and he told me the story. He said when Bitcoin was $16,000, he knew it was low. He didn't want to sell. And so he took his Bitcoin and he borrowed against it at 0% interest, right? This is way lower than any mortgage. And he bought a house in Palm Beach. And then Bitcoin doubled in price. And he realized that he had enough money in that line of credit that he could borrow an entirely new house. And so he bought another house, which he's now renting out. And so that's the power of, instead of selling your Bitcoin, it's borrowing against your Bitcoin. Now, this is something that wealthy people always do, right? Elon Musk, he borrows against his shares. Wealthy oligarchs, they borrow against the value of their art or their yacht. But it has mostly been something which has only been available to them. But now that we have Bitcoin, we all have this asset, which is intrinsically valuable. And we all have access to Bitcoin DeFi, which means that we can keep this asset, we can borrow against it, hodling is hard. So this is a way to unlock the value of your Bitcoin without selling your Bitcoin, in the same way that wealthy people are able to unlock the value of their assets without having to go through a tax event, without having to sell away those assets, and so that they can continue to accrue the value of those assets. And you know what happens to those assets? They keep going up in price because no one's selling them. They already borrow against them. And so I expect this is going to be a major change for Bitcoin, because now nobody needs to sell another Bitcoin ever again.
Yeah, it's quite intricate because, of course, borrowing against things when the market is generally moving up will work in your favor. But of course, if the market moved against you, your Bitcoin would get liquidated. That
is why you should look to maintain a collateral ratio,
yeah.
right? So there's a discipline here. right? How much should you spend? How much can you afford to spend? This is sort of like a weird, airy-fairy question that people ask themselves. And as a result, everyone in our consumer-based society is overspending. But if you think, I want assets and I only want to spend so much that the amount of debt that I have on those assets will never get liquidated. So for example, if you have 3x, like if you have, you know, $30,000 in Bitcoin, or 30,000 pounds in Bitcoin, and you take out a $10,000 loan, Bitcoin would need to drop by 60+% for you to be in risk of being liquidated. Now that happens, but it basically only happens from Bitcoin being at its absolute top price. So the chance, right, that you are going to do that on the 2 or 3 days where Bitcoin is at its absolute peak is quite low. And if you are doing it, then maybe you should consider whether or not Bitcoin might be in a moment of exuberance and take out a 4x collateral ratio. But this helps you think, how much can I actually afford to spend, right? How much should I be spending? So I've taken out loans. I actually maintain a much higher than 3x collateral ratio because I'm conservative. I never want to lose my Bitcoin.
Yep.
But it gives everyone an opportunity to think, what is the right level of spending for me? And it sort of gives you an actual metric. And the other thing about it is, if you do get liquidated, you're taking a loss, but the loss is only about 10%, because one of the cool things about zero is the collateral ratio that allows you is 110%. If you will not get liquidated until you drop below 110% in terms of liquidation. Now, redemptions might be different, but in either case, you are your net difference from selling the Bitcoin, which is what you would have done otherwise, is quite small.
Yep.
And so like all things, it's really important that people do their own research, right? That you can only be financially sovereign if you research. And I'm giving a high level explanation here, but if you are a listener and you want to use zero, you should go and research it. And there's a lot of documentation in Sovryn's website, in the wiki, in forums, and you can basically ask people. It's a very friendly community and they'll help. So do your research, but the opportunities are really eye-opening.
Yeah, they certainly are. Bitcoin is the largest sort of crypto. I always have this distinction because I think Bitcoin is very separate to a lot of what's happening in the crypto space. It's unique in many, many ways. But I do think what Sovryn's doing is massive, because unlocking liquidity with Bitcoin is huge. You're giving people that option to say, okay, I don't want to sell my Bitcoin, but I need some cash, and you're freeing that and facilitating it through Sovryn. And I think that's absolutely massive. Of course, there's risks with 2022, for example, or really starting in November 2021, Bitcoin did go down 60+%. I can't remember exactly where it was, 70%. You'd have been very unlucky, like you say, to have sold at 69K and then, had to ride that out. So there are risks. But one thing I think we all should really strive to be is independent. We become so dependent on people telling us what to do and, shying away from risk. Well, I think the important thing is to understand the risk and make a calculated decision as a sovereign individual, and deal with whatever comes as a result of it. But I think what you guys are doing in regards to unlocking liquidity for Bitcoin is huge. And like you say, with your friend who bought the one house and then it went in his favor and he could now buy two, I think that's something we're going to see far, far more of, and it really comes down to, in order for you to have Bitcoin collateral.
Right, he's now got two houses and his Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
Sold. Yeah. So, it's not without risk, and you do need to understand.
Of course.
But we've been very coddled. We've been told this is all very risky and very complicated. Yep. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. We'll take care of you. And, this is the financial reflection of that quote. Those who would give up their freedom for convenience or security will have neither. Right? So,
amen.
Yes, you are going to only be as free as you make yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And this sort of ties in with what we've really been talking about a lot during this interview is what Bitcoin's bringing to the table. It's giving you that choice back. You know, right now we live in a world, certainly in the UK and the US, where the government is so in control of everything that we do. And there's this kind of disguise and cotton wool bud that's been put around people. But actually, as a result of us having that cotton wool bud put around many of us, there's a lot of our freedoms that have been taken away. Bitcoin is largely, I think, giving many of those back and giving people the choice to take them back, I think, more importantly than everything. We spoke about stablecoins a little bit. I was actually reading an article earlier where Circle's actually considering lowering their US bond allocation that backs their stablecoin because they don't really trust it anymore. You know,
I actually believe they've taken it down to zero.
oh, really?
They no longer hold any US bonds. They now hold only cash and bonds from large banks. So,
Wow.
yeah, in a way, what they're saying is that we trust the large banks more than we trust the government. And actually, that makes sense because if you think about it, banking's been around a lot longer than the US government. Banking has, existed for hundreds of years. Governments and fiat currencies come and go. So, I don't hold USDC, and I wouldn't, except maybe briefly for a transaction, because to my mind, it's an inferior form. It's like somebody's IOU to their bank account, right? So it's an inferior form of a bank account. So I tend to try to hold assets that I can control.
Yep.
Bitcoin primarily, sovereign dollars, and some other crypto assets is the primary way in which I manage my finances. And the other thing that I believe is that you for example are a trader. I don't have the time, energy, or skill set to be a trader, and I think you can make if you're a good trader, you can make significant value for yourself. But there's so much trading activity out there, which is actually more similar to confusion or to gambling. The ability to find opportunities and then invest in them and hold them for the long term is how most wealthy people have become wealthy. And so my philosophy when it comes to my sort of the way I manage my finances is, one, I want things that I can control, which can't be taken away from me and which can't be censored. And two, I want things that I can feel comfortable, going into a coma now for 10 years and waking up in 10 years time and having the same portfolio. And so that's what I aspire to do for myself, but also in Sovryn, those are the kinds of things that we're trying to build, tools which help people do that. And so there's a big focus on building sustainable things that aren't Ponzi-nomics, creating an environment. So for example, in Sovryn, there is no Tether and USDC allowed because it would create a systemic risk to the system. If Tether goes down or USDC goes down, all of Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, BSC, DeFi will collapse that same day. Yep. Because it's all collateralized by those dollars. Sovryn will survive. And so Sovryn, like Bitcoin, is being built to last, right? And so I think when we talk about building on Bitcoin, it's those three principles: building on the platform, building on the sound money, and building on the sound finance principles.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. Even though, like you mentioned, I'm a trader, fact of the matter is trading is not for most people. Any person that's traded for long enough will tell you just how hard it is. The harsh reality is that over 90% of people that try trading lose money. So I always steer people, certainly when you introduce crypto and leverage, you are, really playing with a pressure cooker. And we always try and steer people away from short-term trading and more into investing in things that they believe in. And you mentioned that you think that Bitcoin is more of a kind of social revolution than a technological one. But there is also a technological revolution, I think, going on with crypto in general, blockchain. We do see similarities with the blockchain industry as we did with the internet. And we actually believe that just like you have your major corporations like Apple, Amazon, They may be bad examples because, of course, you've got centralized aspects there. We do think that you do have certain layer one protocols. Bitcoin, I think, is very separate from the likes of Ethereum or perhaps other smart contract protocols that we have. But we do think they're going to be the real big winners in the future. You know, their operating systems, I think, largely different to what Bitcoin as a layer one is.
I think that there will be some significant wins there, but I think that there are going to be very, very few.
Yeah.
So I think that there's an important case for Ethereum as a platform.
Yep.
I think it has a massive network effect. But I think a better way to think about these things is to think about them as proto-nations.
Yeah, Metcalfe's law and all that.
So, yeah, but it's more than that. The technological systems, right? I think one of the reasons that people often say that crypto and what we're seeing in crypto looks a lot like the internet, but it actually looks nothing like the internet. If you think about the way the internet bubble happened, it started around 1993, 1994, grew, and then in 2000, it absolutely collapsed. It was like this. It was one giant wave. Crypto looks nothing like that. Crypto is this weird 4-year cycle, looks very attached to the Bitcoin halving, right? And it's all kinds of things that have, a huge chunk of it has nothing to do with creating what we would usually think of as businesses or value. Meme coins and NFTs and Cardano and, a whole bunch of things which don't have any utility really, but they're huge. Now, so we keep saying, and I keep hearing people say, oh, it's like the internet all over again, but it looks super different. And why does it look different? It looks different for a few reasons. First of all, why are we seeing NFTs and meme coins being so important? The reason is, I think, because what they are a symptom of is that we are restructuring society. We're restructuring what we consider property. We're restructuring what we consider culture. We're restructuring what we consider art. That's NFTs. And meme coins is a restructuring of what we consider community, what we consider membership and belonging, what we consider nationhood. Now, these are not sophisticated things. These are just games because we're just experimenting right now. But that's nothing like the internet. Then you look at something like Ethereum. Ethereum is very, very powerful, right? It's generated a huge amount of value. But how many people use Ethereum? You know how many, a small mobile app, right, which you launched today, if it's even barely successful, we'll have 10,000 MAU like that, right? 10,000 users a month. You know how many applications on Ethereum have 10,000 MAU? 10,000 monthly active users?
Probably not many. Probably a handful, maybe
one.
5. Okay. I was
one.
5 times.
Only Uniswap, right? So hold on. Now, why is this important? Because Ethereum is a settlement layer and a governance layer for an economy. It's not about how many people are using it day to day. It's effectively a set of rules. It's like a new kind of nation. Now, it doesn't understand that it's a nation yet. It doesn't have a sense of shared purpose. It doesn't have true governance, but it is a proto-economy. It's a new economy. So you've got like 187 or something countries in the world. Now you have 188. One of them is Ethereum. This is a new thing. It's got its own set of rules, its own economy, its own currency, everything. This is nothing like Facebook. It's nothing like Amazon. It's nothing like Pets.com.
But then Facebook's nothing like a Ford. It's nothing like a car. But the motoring industry. So I see where you're going.
That's the thing, right? Blockchain is as different from the internet as the internet was from, PCs. It's just
a telephone. Yeah,
exactly.
No, that's really what, when I say technological revolution and likening it to the internet, it's not that they're the same thing. And it's not even that we've got this whole boom and bust that happened with the internet. You had your blow off in 2000. It's more that there's a technology under here that is changing the world in the same way that the internet did, or perhaps the motoring industry. Cars changed the world. Everyone got rid of their horses at that point, some reluctantly at the start, which, we have people that are reluctant to crypto. That's really what I mean by a technological revolution here. There's the blockchain is that.
But let me for people who are thinking about this as an investment, right? I think there's a very, very significant implication. I think if you get the category wrong, if you're thinking categorically about what is happening in the wrong way, then you'd make the wrong investment, right? So when cars were emerging, you could have thought that this is, a revolution in wheeled vehicles, and made an investment in wheels. And in fact, you would have done well if maybe you'd invested in Michelin, but it was certainly, right, not the best or most important investment you could have made. When people think about these platforms as sort of like, and they use the metaphor of the internet, right? Then they think, all right, well, what we need is those things which have unique and special features, and they're going to be successful. So, for example, people invest in Solana because they think that Solana is going to be fast, or they invest in, Zcash because they think that Zcash has privacy or whatever. But that's not what we're building. We're not building products that have features. We're trying to build new economic and effectively governance systems. We're building nations. And so I think what you need to think when you're looking at this is, who has a handle on how you build and scale a nation? In other words, how do you scale its economy? How do you scale its membership? And how do you scale its loyalty? And then you look at Bitcoin and you say to yourself, wow, Bitcoin doesn't do anything, doesn't have any of these features. Now, these features are coming, but it's the biggest, it's the baddest, it's the 900-pound gorilla. Why? Because Bitcoin is the closest to understanding. It's not quite there yet, and I think Sovryn is a step ahead, right? It's the next step forward for Bitcoin. But Bitcoin, in many ways, is the closest to understanding what we're really doing here. We're building a nation. It's got a clear set of rules that don't change. It's got a clear ideology that doesn't change. It's got a clear set of membership, many of whom are really annoying, right? The maxis and the laser eyes, they're fucking dumb. But if you have a group of fanatics, that's just a symptom of having, a much larger group of people who have a cohesive, rational, shared ideology. And that's why Bitcoin's the biggest, because Bitcoin is most clearly a nation. The second biggest is Ethereum. Why? Because Ethereum has a set of rules which has allowed for economic growth and activity, and also has a looser, more diverse economy and governance. And I think Sovryn is a massive opportunity. And why I'm so excited about Sovryn is because I think that Sovryn might be the first project to truly recognize what's going on here, and is looking explicitly to build out these tools. And Sovryn has started out very small and is growing significantly, but consistently. And I think the opportunity here is to take this idea of features and recognize that they are secondary, bring them into Bitcoin as little pieces of bring them into Bitcoin in the same way that you would bring a chip shop into, put an Irish pub in England, right? So you have an Irish pub and you have an Indian restaurant and you have a pizza place and you have all of these things. England stays England, right? But it has a diversity of different features.
Yeah.
And so as you do that, I think what you'll see is, as big as Bitcoin is now, it's going to grow much more powerful and much more significant.
One last question I've got you, because I'm very aware that we've taken up quite a bit of your time, and I do really appreciate it, is what can we look for moving forwards in regards to Sovryn? What have you guys got? If you could maybe share with us what you guys are working on in the kind of future and we can kind of keep an eye on?
Sure. So people within the Ethereum community are working, I would say, on two primary things right now. On the infrastructure layer, we're looking to bring new types of infrastructure to Bitcoin, which allows Bitcoin to have more of this generalizable economic, like a full economy, not just the currency, but an entire economy built around the currency. That will include tokens, will include NFTs, will include DAOs, will include DeFi. And we're looking to build a platform which will allow more and more people to build this kind of stuff, as well as bridging and trading. Because what is a bridge, right? If you think about a bridge between BSC and Ethereum, it's like a trade route. It's like the Silk Road, right, between China and Rome. That's how those two economies trade with each other. And so we need to have more ways for Bitcoin to trade with the rest of the crypto space. So that's on the infrastructure layer. And there's already a bunch of really interesting stuff that has come out of Sovryn. We've published a white paper around how to bring rollups to Bitcoin, which would basically allow Bitcoin to do anything with infinite scalability, not tomorrow, but soon. And I think that's going to completely change the game for Bitcoin. People are massively underestimating where Bitcoin is going to be over the next 2 or 3 years. And then the other thing that people are really excited about in building in the Sovryn ecosystem is more ways to give people easy ways of using these tools, better UX, better mobile applications, cool stuff that you can do with ordinals or NFTs, making it easier for more developers to integrate wallets with Sovryn. In Sovryn, we have this thing we say you shouldn't have to be technical to be free. And so what we're trying to do is, on the infrastructure side, we're trying to increase the types of things that you can build. And on the interface side, we're trying to reduce the barrier of entry so that everyone can take advantage of them.
Yeah, I certainly look forward to it. Yago, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I really do hope we can get you on again, because you have not only some fascinating views in regards to Sovryn, and it is, of course, very interesting. And again, I do think it is a massive case unlocking liquidity on Bitcoin and kind of furthering Bitcoin and adding that kind of financial layer to it. But you also have some really fascinating views on the blockchain space as a whole. And I'd love to get you back on to talk about some of those. But it's been a pleasure. I really have enjoyed having you on. And I wish you guys all the best. And for anybody who is interested in finding out about Sovryn, yourself, we will leave links to everything in the description. If there's any plugs you want to give, now is definitely the time to do it.
Oh, I would suggest the best thing you can go to the Sovryn website and you can follow Sovryn Twitter, but the best thing to do, I think, is to jump into the community. It's a very welcoming. This is a community first and a protocol second. So the best way to get to know Sovryn is to get to know Sovryns.
Yep. Thank you very much, Yago. It's been an absolute pleasure. All the best.
Thank you.